Our thoughts are not us as we understand ourselves. The I that observes situations, the thinking that goes through our head is more of a reflection of that self, of the beliefs that we hold, of the energy that we cultivate repeatedly. Now, thoughts can be described as electric energy circling around our field, but within that non-physical field also exists spirits. And I'm talking about not necessarily like a ghost of a person who's passed. That can be the case sometimes, but more so energetic forms of consciousness that are in a plane that is close enough to humans that they can communicate with humans. And often these spirits show up as thought forms. Now, what's interesting about this is these spirits can take on the role of acting like they're your conscience or acting like they're you and they're giving you advice. Some people call these spirit guides. Now, I'm not going to say these are good or bad necessarily, but the thing is, we have to understand, we have to understand that this thinking is still just a reflection. And the thoughts and ideas that tend to resonate with us and connect with us tend to be a reflection of our inner state, of our inner being. So if you have a bunch of limiting negative beliefs, if you're carrying a bunch of dense, heavy energy, and you get a bunch of thought forms that are just reflecting that, and then you start believing that you're in that state, and it literally is this reinforcing feedback loop. So the thing about these spirits and these entities and these thought forms is they're attracted to a certain magnetism, which we give off by literally giving off a certain frequency. So when we vibrate that way and we continue to be reaffirmed by these things that may be communicating with us externally, we're literally just giving them more of a foothold within our own space, within our own energy. Now, there were practices that high level occultists did to actually use these spirits and to get them to only tell the truth. Imagine that, right? I don't know if you've ever tried, like when your mind tells you something, you write it down and see if it actually comes to pass. For most people, it's like 50-50. Sometimes people call this intuition, sometimes people call it like guidance, like I mentioned. But this is kind of the dangerous thing about it, that a lot of times it's just some conscious entity that is trying to tap into your field because they want to get you to do something because it's entertaining to them, quite honestly. It feeds them. This can be, when this gets darker, like the heavier levels of this, you can actually have like entities that are more like ghosts of humans that can be stuck here and they can cling on to people, or entities that just live in that plane that have become very distorted and they look for humans that have very negative tendencies, like anger, like certain addictions, what you'd call like the deadly sins, right? These entities will come and try to cling on to people that are habitually, regularly going through these things because these entities are stuck where they are because they couldn't overcome those external urges and influences. So they come and attach to you in order to get their fill of that. And that's why a lot of times with like addictions, any sort of addictive behavior that leads you into some sort of negative emotional state as a result, that is a form of actually your energy being siphoned from you by entities that, they can't inhabit a human body to have that experience and they can't move on from that. So they're going to be talking into your ear saying, yeah, you need more of that. Yeah, you need more of that. That paired with the actual physicality of what your body craves within that, it becomes a sort of identity patterning that we go through where we start to see that thing as that's ourselves, that's who we are. Like I said, it's not necessarily always the super heavy things. Sometimes it can be as simple of a thought pattern as like you start thinking negatively about something that you do or something that you feel about yourself, and then these entities swarm around and they say, oh, he's thinking negatively about this, she's thinking negatively about this, we're going to swoop in here and we're going to actually perpetuate that idea because we want to live in this energy. We want to live in this person's space. Now, this is a very problematic phenomenon because most of the world is not aware that spirits reside within thought forms, right? I'm not saying all thought forms are spirits, and I'm not saying all spirits are thought forms, okay? But they show up in thought forms because that's the closest access that we have to those non-physical realms. But like I said, this is very problematic in the world because this gets to the level where you could have a full-on like demonic entity possessing a person and they have no idea. This is when you get the people that are like absolutely irrational and just seem to be insane in the world, and they're doing all this crazy stuff and they're yelling at this person and freaking out about that person. Oftentimes this is not like normal human behavior. This is not like how humans even function. It's because that human is tapped into something that is very negative, that's using that human as an outlet for whatever that energy is in order to get more of that energy back. It's always about getting the energy back. It's always about how they're getting energy and how they're using you to get energy. But most people wouldn't associate it with this. Within psychology and the realm of Western medicine, where they don't believe in the non physical realm, they diagnose this with things like schizophrenia, for instance, or bipolar disorder, or things like that, where there can be an imbalance within the chemistry of the body, but ultimately this does stem from a metaphysical level where there's some sort of energetic patterning that's imbalanced, and very, very often, more often than not, that is caused by some sort of spirit inhabiting your field. Okay, now this is not something to freak out about. This is not something to say, oh my God, this is happening. I'm stuck with this energy and there's this thing that's possessing me. Like I said, there's levels of this. There's like what you've seen on like the exorcism movies, which is like the far, far end extreme cases of this, which you don't have to worry about if you've got a good sense of self in the first place. But then there's the levels where it's like you might just have a negative, repetitive thought form going through your head, or you might have something trying to convince you that it's guiding you and it actually leads you into really bad situations. Because a lot of the spiritual community actually runs into that sort of thing where they say, listen to your heart, like listen to your guidance, listen to your intuition, but people aren't really tapped into themselves. They don't know themselves on a deep enough level, so their intuition, their guidance, their heart is actually clouded, and what they're actually listening to are spirits that are just taking their energy because they're still convinced that that is their intuition, that's their guidance, that is their heart space, right? What we need to be listening to is to honestly not be listening to anything, not be looking for guidance necessarily, because the real guidance, if you will, like the real like resonance you might feel with something, it shows up when you're not looking for it. And it's not like a voice in your head that says do this and do that and do this and do that. It's usually something a lot more intrinsic. Like you might hear a tone or feel a certain something that is rare, that is it's clear, and it brings a calm over you instead of like you need to go do this and you need to go do that and you need to go do this. That's not what it is. Okay, so like I mentioned, there were practices of high level occultists that would actually be able to get these spirits to tell the truth all the time. But if we don't know how to do that, if you don't know the rituals or don't care to actually even get into any of that stuff, then what we need to do is become really, really clear as to what we are and the self that exists, that pervades all of this, that is in observation of everything that's going on externally to us. So we have to recognize that everything we're experiencing outside of us is the reflection. It is not the self that we are observing. The self is observing. And we're seeing the reflection of that. And sometimes through the human lens, when we have experience built up in our life, it becomes very jaded. It's like looking into a dirty mirror or a cracked mirror, and then looking back and being like, I'm like this, I'm like this, I'm like this. And through these cracks, we get these spirits, right? We get these entities that show up and start mirroring back that distortion. So, my friends, we have to know who we are deep down. We have to come back to the source of knowing who we are by sitting with ourselves and simply observing. This is why meditation is honestly one of the most important practices you could do. Um, just the fact of sitting down, laying down, and observing your breath and observing all the thought forms, all the feelings going by you like they're nothing more than clouds in the sky. You're not going to try to reach up and control the cloud as this cloud is shifting its shape as it goes through the sky, but it is just going to pass by whether you do anything or not. And that's what we have to realize about our thoughts. Sometimes it is such an urgent thing that our mind seems to be throwing at us, telling us this and that. And we have to recognize that's not us. Okay? That's not who we are, and we don't have to listen to it. And this takes time, this takes practice. But you have to realize that you are the one that's in control of your ship. And the more that you tap into that clearer light within yourself, the more truthful your reflection becomes. Okay? But never take it as like guidance. Never take it as, if anything, regard it as a suggestion. And from your internal clarity and your process of deducing what is good for you and not, you can take it or leave it. But it is nothing more than a suggestion. Oftentimes there's this stigma within spiritual communities that it's like, if you don't listen to your guidance, something really bad is going to happen. And ironically enough, I feel like a lot of these beliefs actually stem from religious patterning from hundreds of years ago within our DNA, where they're saying, if you disobey God, like, see, he's going to punish you, right? This is not how true spirituality works, which spirituality actually means the study of spirits. So this is not how this works in terms of like being conscious and being an energetic being. You're not going to be punished for using your free will. You're not going to be punished for deciding that this is good for me and this is not good for me. You're simply going to be on a path. You're simply going to choose a waveform, and that waveform is going to go in a certain direction. But if you're choosing the waveform based off of the reflections, it's naturally going to be distorted. It's not going to be coming from the true source that is within yourself, the supreme being that is within yourself, which is not the reflection. It is casting the reflection. So, my friends, we have to recognize the difference. And that's really what I want to be getting at today. Know yourself. That's why they're always saying, know thyself is the greatest truth that you could actually come into, to sit with yourself and recognize that what's going through your head is not actually you. You can sit with yourself, you can be in the silence, you can be in the stillness and recognize that you're something entirely other than what your mind is saying. I am this and I am that, and today I'm going to do this and today I'm going to do that. That's not you. You're the one that's observing that. Okay? So that's all for today, my friends. I hope that is helpful and makes sense to you. And with that, be whole, be well, and we'll talk soon. See ya.